Fires in Sumatra and the yearly haze problem could be drastically reduced in 5 years or less. Global Forest Watch, an organization that monitors forest activity, tells Channel NewsAsia this would be possible through concerted efforts on the ground involving palm oil companies and law enforcement. And all stakeholders, from financial institutions to even consumers, can do more to get the $20 billion industry in Indonesia to adopt sustainable sourcing practices. But palm oil markets in the region do not seem sufficiently committed to sustainability, perhaps put off by the cost. This week, we put the spotlight on the haze, addressing its root cause and the challenges in weeding out unsustainable practices. Monica Kotwani with this story.
The dry season begins this month and runs until October. About 250 kilometers from Singapore, on Sumatra Island, farmers are getting ready to clear land traditionally by burning vegetation. The winds that occur during the southwest monsoon could fan the smoke and its unhealthy particulates right towards Singapore and Peninsular Malaysia, as it had done for years, as seen during Singapore's worst bout of haze in June 2013. Increasingly, the pressure is on large palm oil and pulp companies to put an end to such practices.
About half of the fires are burning on land that's in the concessions of palm oil and pulpwood companies in Riau and across Sumatra. Now, we're not saying that those companies necessarily caused those fires. In fact, we know that often the fires start outside their land and then spread into their land. A lot of illegal and small palm oil companies and others who are taking advantage of disputes over land to use fire to clear land cheaply.
Mr. Sizer says large companies have a responsibility to educate the farmers and provide them with alternatives to slash and burn methods. The firms should also help to put out fires not just on their own land and investigate whether small farmers are supplying them with sustainably produced palm oil and other raw materials. Some 40% of Indonesia's palm oil is produced by third-party suppliers or owners of small firms. Cargill, the largest importer of palm oil into the United States, says 40% of its palm fruit are from smallholders. It says a majority of its crops are from smallholders, which have adopted Cargill's own land clearing practices. But it also buys crops from other smallholders, and it's working with many of them to adopt sustainable practices. Still, Cargill says unraveling the supply chain is a complicated process as the oil is mixed at different stages of production.
Around 87% of the palm oil that's produced goes to markets who are not ready to work closely with sustainability. So around 13% are going to the European, North American, Australia, and New Zealand markets. Those markets are demanding more and more insight into the source of their food and their food products, and so that leverages itself well to work in sustainability. Other markets we have to work with in order to both get them interested in sustainability as well as being able to respond to it to make sure that we have a traceable and sustainable supply chain.
Singapore may be a small market, but experts say more can be done to promote sustainable sourcing and in the process play a part in addressing the haze that has plagued the country for years.
Now, it's thought that about half of all household products in supermarkets are likely to contain palm oil. Now, it's a healthier substitute for other vegetable oils, so you may find them in margarines, cookies, chocolates, and even ice creams. And you can also find them in shampoos, soaps, and even cosmetics. What about craving for some burger and fries at your favorite fast food joint? Well, it's likely to have been prepared in edible palm oil. And perhaps you drive a hybrid car. Well, the biodiesel that's used in these cars also comes from palm oil.
Some say certifying products will help consumers make more informed choices. There are international certifications, such as the one by the Round Table on Sustainable Palm Oil, a voluntary non-profit organization comprising palm oil stakeholders. But experts say it's not widely used at the moment and is not likely to be found in any local supermarkets. The Agri-Veterinary Authority says its food labelling focuses on food safety and the traceability of foods sold in Singapore. Meanwhile, large palm oil companies are pledging to produce palm oil sustainably by not clearing high conservation value forests, not developing on peatland, and adhering to a no-burn policy. Experts say pledging sustainability throughout the supply chain could be given a further push by financial backers. Banks, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds and asset management funds often invest in palm oil, and these investors are often listed on the stock exchanges in Singapore and Malaysia, for example.
Investors are starting to become conscious that they need to have certain standards in place and hold the investee companies to those standards to protect against financial performance risks. Because if the palm oil companies that they invest in are the subject of a boycott or a blacklisting or an adverse regulatory decision, that will impact the price performance of the shares, that will impact dividends and so on. So from a purely financial perspective, there is a case for financial investors paying some attention to these guidelines and getting the investors to do so as well.
Mr. Pereira says Singapore's proposed transboundary haze pollution bill will put the pressure on investors, as it's a sign that governments are ready to take tougher action to enforce laws and take companies to task. But until it's implemented, consumers have another avenue to pressure companies, thanks to a tool launched by the Global Forest Watch this month.
Where we see a fire alert, we're actually going to be able to task satellites each day to photograph those areas on the land at 50 centimetre resolution, and then immediately put that up online, give it to the governments, let the public see. We believe that a very significant reduction in the fires and haze is possible within the next 5 years, or even less. Our research shows that the problem is very concentrated in a small number of sub-districts. Literally, we're talking about a few dozen villages. That's where most of the fires are taking place.
Mr. Sizer says this information will help with firefighting efforts and hold those responsible for illegal burning accountable. It will put more pressure on local and federal governments in a country that's the world's largest palm oil supplier.